This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, and today we're here for a pit tip. These tips are designed to help you out on track while racing. Now, today's tip is in regards to something I've mentioned on the show several times, and that is keeping a logbook. In racing, a logbook is a way for teams to keep track of information for every track that they run at. Now, I've received a lot of emails from viewers out there asking me the kind of information that I keep in my logbook, and I'm here to tell you there is no correct answer. It's going to vary hugely from team to team, and it's also going to be dependent on the type of car you're running and how much of an information junkie you are. But the point is, having that information, having it available, is going to make it easier every time you return to a track or run a similar track in the future. So let's talk about my logbook, which I have to admit comes in two parts. Number one, I have my basic logbook, which I'll get to in a moment. Then I also keep some notes on a piece of scratch paper. These notes are usually done on a pad, and I end up usually just discarding them. But if you look through these notes, you'll see that I have varying different information like tire temps and changes to the car I make while building a setup. That way I can compare and see what the car is doing, as well as take notes on what I, the driver, feel these changes made to the setup. In the case of the notes we are looking at, I was making some final adjustments to my ride height and trying to cure some understeer that was happening to my car. Now, my logbook from last season was actually fairly simple, but it did keep a certain amount of information that'll carry over fairly well into future races. Now, starting at the top, I had a section for each track with laps, length, banking, amount of corners or elevation change, depending on it being road or oval. I will record the pole qualifying time in addition to my qualifying time and the name of the setup used. I will have a section devoted to fuel mileage with overall miles per gallon, how many laps a full tank will last, and how many gallons required to complete a full race. I'll also write down any strategy for pit stops during the race. I will also record the racing conditions, the weather, and anything else that would affect the setup or race conditions. I then have a different section that is devoted to the race itself. If I can, I will record my tire temps, the air pressure, and the amount of tire wear. I'll also be aware of my fuel levels and how my mileage compares to my estimates. This might affect later pit stops in the race. I want to be aware of and record what my car was doing and make notes of any adjustments made to the car during pit stops. Now, this coming season, I want to take things to a whole new level, and this comes from my mindset of always trying to be better, always looking for improvements and taking a progressive approach towards it. I want to be able to take this information and make it even more of an asset to myself in the future. So for this season, I have a binder, and if you open this binder, you'll find that I have the season schedule already ready to go with a list of every race for the next 12 weeks. I then have a section of the binder already created for each track. When you open a section, you will find a pre-created setup sheet. This is a sheet that I can record any or all of the setup information from the car. I also have a spot to record the same racing information that I talked about earlier from last season's notebook. This also allows me to keep those notes from practice instead of throwing them away. Just stick them in my 3-hole punch, open up the binder, and stick those sheets right in. Actually, I'd put them behind my setup sheet just to make it really nice. Take a moment to get this all set. Now I have my setup, my notes from the race, and all the notes from the changes I made during practice just to be aware of what it did to the tires, to the handling of the car. Now I will say, as I sit here telling you about all of this, taking all of these notes, the word obsessive certainly comes to mind. But I have to tell you, even this much is a fraction of the amount of information that a real race team is keeping each week. And I have to tell you, knowledge is power, especially in racing. Now, if you were to take a look back at this season schedule, you'll see that we're running Mid-Ohio. We ran Mid-Ohio last season, and all of my notes from last season are going to be a great starting point. I already have a setup, I already know how it handles, and I already know how it did in the race. I can make small improvements to it, take those notes, and be that much more ahead of the game moving forward. We're also running Auto Club this season, the sister track to Michigan, and we ran Michigan last season. I'll be able to use that setup and all of my notes and information moving forward and again be ahead of the game. And then I can look at any of the tracks from this season's schedule and see what tracks they're similar to from last season and use those setups and notes as a starting point. Now, it really doesn't matter if you do it on a small scale like I did last season or on a larger scale like I'm going to do this season. All of this is going to give you more understanding of what the car is doing, how it behaves, and make it that much easier to make setup changes for any track that you end up going to. I hope you've enjoyed this long-winded pit tip. If you have any ideas for future pit tips, please email me at shaun@thesimpit.com, and I'll be sure to add your pit tip to the list of other ones at our website. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.